Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, we're going to talk about the event scheduler, talk about what it is, where to find the settings for it, and how it works. So first of all, what are event schedules? What is the event scheduler? So essentially what it is it allows you to have scripts automatically trigger at certain points in your game, and by default they repeat. So if you wanted a script to happen every 30 seconds or something like that, then one way would be to do a while loop, which is constantly ticking for 30 seconds, or the other way is to use the inbuilt event scheduler. So this can be used for things like, for example, at nighttime, it triggers a script where all your NPCs go into their houses, and then during the daytime, or when it becomes daytime, your NPCs appear back outside on the overworld map. So that's just an example, and it's tied to the day-night system of RPG in a Box. Now, it doesn't have to use the day-night system, so in other words, you don't have to set up days and nights and things like that, but it does use the same clock that the day-night cycle uses, okay? So it doesn't just have to be, things that happen at night, things that happen at day. It can literally just be, it's as simple as a script happens every 30 seconds or every minute or whatever the time period is that you want something to happen over and over again. So it's a way of triggering background scripts, okay? Be like on your phone or on your computer where you set up event schedules. So at a certain time, you might have an alarm go off, or at a certain time of the day, you might have a song play or something like that. This is the same kind of principle, where at some point during your game, a script will trigger over and over again at that same point of time in the game and do something, whatever that thing is, okay? So that's what the event system is, okay? So first of all, before we get into then how to use it, let's talk about where on the interface do you need to look to find these things. So the first thing you need to be aware of is in the game configuration panel, under gameplay and under day-night. Here are the day-night settings. Now, you don't need to worry about the lighting presets for day and night if you're not using an actual day and night, okay? Obviously, you would set the lighting up for your night and day if you were going to have a day-night cycle, and you would define those here. And then this is the most important part for both the day-night system if you're using it, but also for your event scheduler. This is your clock duration, okay? And I'll explain that later. Let's first of all just finish pointing out all the things you need to be aware of. So this is one of the things you need to be aware of, and it's found in the game configuration, gameplay, day-night settings, okay? It's probably the most important setting right here, and I'll explain how that works in a moment. And then the actual event scheduler itself is found in the map editor. So make sure you're in the map editor. Make sure you've got nothing selected, no objects or tiles or anything like that, so that the map properties tab is available. And if you scroll down, you'll see the event scheduler here. Okay? So these are the two things that you need to be aware of. The event scheduler, and in the game configuration panel, the day-night clock. Okay? So now let me explain how to use the event scheduler, okay? The easiest way to explain this is to think of a clock, okay? So if I put on the screen the visualization of a clock, okay? As we understand it, the clock goes from 12 to 12, okay? It goes from, if the hour hand starts at the top, it's going to be at 12, and it goes round the clock, back round to 12, okay? And that's how we measure a 12-hour period. Goes round to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Goes all the way around, right? And in a Earth day, it goes round the clock twice, okay? Because 12 midday, 12 midnight, okay? So we go round the clock twice in an Earth day, okay? However, in an RPG in a Box day, it goes round that clock once, okay? So halfway round the clock would be midday, and then the other halfway round the clock would be midnight, okay? So 12, when the hour hand is at the top, that's midnight. When the hour hand is at 6, essentially, it's midday. Okay, that's how RPG in a Box works. Okay, so halfway around the clock is midday, and at the top of the clock is midnight. Okay, so if we take a look in our game configuration panel, gameplay, day, night, this is where 12 o'clock is. This is where you're basically saying, how long does it take to get to 12 o'clock? How long does it take for a whole day to go around that clock? You know, how long does it take to go all the way around? Okay. Now, the first thing you should know is that the RPG in a Box clock always starts at 0. And then the maximum is defined here. So if we set this to 10, by the way, this, I should say as well, it's obvious here, but I'll say it anyway. This is in seconds. Okay. So currently an entire day takes 10 seconds. Okay. So it's going to go from 0 to 10 and then go around 0 to 10, 0 to 10, 0 to 10. Okay. 0 is essentially, if you were to picture it on our clock, it would be like 1 second past midnight. Okay. So imagine the hour hand reaching 12 o'clock. Okay. And then imagine the hour hand goes just a second past 12. That's where 0 is. Okay. So it's you. 0 is you starting to go round the clock again. You've just gone past 12. 0 is immediately after 12. So in this case, 0 would be immediately after 10. So this would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then a second later, 0. Okay? However, if you set this to 60, then it's going to take 60 seconds. Okay? Which means if you set event schedules to happen every 30 seconds, every 10 seconds, then you'll have 6 events basically, right? Because every 10 seconds you can fit 6 events into this time period. Okay. Another way to think about this is to take that clock, the visualization of a clock, and stretch it out into a progress bar. Okay, which I've done already. So I'm going to leave that at 10, click OK. And what I've done is I've gone into my startup script and I've added a show widget. Okay. Now what this show widget is set to, if we go into the user interface, let me just change the name of this to clock. This progress bar here is set to the current value global.time, which is the inbuilt clock. And the maximum value is 10 because I set that to the maximum value as we set in the max duration box. So this is going to show our current time as it goes from 0 to 10. Okay. And then what I've done here is I've got a text label, which what I'm also going to do in my initialization script is while true do end widget clock dot element 0001 2, sorry, that's the text bar, dot text equals time seconds and then plus global dot time. And let's just string that just in case. Okay, so that will show us an every second update it. That will both fix the while loop from crashing, but it will just mean every second it's updating that because it's ticking every second anyway. You can't change how fast this clock ticks. It's always going to tick a second. You can obviously change how long a day is, but you can't make it go tick faster, like in milliseconds or minutes. It's always going to tick every second. So this is always going to be how long it takes the clock to go from 1 hour essentially on the clock to another hour. Okay, so let's just go into game and just see what this looks like visually. So you can see that when it gets to 10, it immediately goes to 0 again, because it's almost like Let's drag it, I'll show you again. Goes to 10, but then immediately resets because essentially 10 and 0 are right next to one another because it's like 12 o'clock basically. Now, what you may have noticed straight away when we started, let's just restart. Is it starts in the middle. Okay, it starts at 5. Okay, and that's deliberate. Okay, because RPG in a Box as well always starts midday. Okay, it's always sort of programmed to start. If you've actually got a day-night cycle, it always starts in the day. So remember what I said earlier, when the day is at 6, if it was on a clock, it would be halfway around the clock. Or was halfway between 0 and 10? 5. So when you restart the game, it starts at 5 and then goes to 6, 7, 8, 9, then it reaches 10 and then it resets. Okay, those are the things that are really important to understand about how the day-night cycle works, or how the clock works for the day-night cycle before we get to the event scheduler. Because once you get your head around how the clock works, then the event scheduler will be trivial. Okay, but you just need to understand first of all that it goes from 0 to the period you set, in this case 10. Okay, but let's set this to 60. Okay, click OK. That now means when we play the game, it's going to start at 30. Okay, now, yes, that's because I didn't change the widget. Let me just update this. The maximum time should be 60. Try again, right? So now you can see that it's going to take a lot longer to get to the end of the progress bar, because now it's 60 seconds. Okay, it's a literal minute. But we were halfway there when we started the game because the clock starts at midday, right? So we've only got 30 seconds to get to midnight. But once it gets to midnight, which it will do in 10 seconds time, so let's just wait for it to get to midnight or 60, whatever you want to call it, it will go immediately back round to 0. Okay, and now it's going to take 60 seconds because we're starting at the very top of the clock again, having to go all the way around it, or at the very far left, in this case, having to go all the way to the far right. Okay, so understand first of all that's how the clock works. It goes from 0 to your maximum period in seconds, and the game always starts halfway through that process. Okay, so now let's take a look at the event scheduler. So we'll go to the map editor. So let's say we wanted an event to happen 30 seconds into the game, okay? So what we'll do is we'll add an event, we'll set the time to 30 seconds, and let's set the script to, let's just quickly write a simple script that displays a message, let's say. So we'll just click new, clock time, and we'll just say display message, the time is up, something like that. Doesn't really matter, okay? But we'll see that message appear. And we want that message to appear 30 seconds in, okay? So we'll set this to clock time, okay? So let's go into game and test it. Oh, I set it on the wrong map. Yeah. Sorry, my mistake. I set it on the wrong map. We are playing... which map are we on? Let's check. Got to check my startup now. What's the map we start on? Overworld FM. Okay, so map editor. That's another thing that's important to mention. Obviously, your events are per map. So that was not triggering because I'd set the event on a different map that I was playing on. So now let's actually test this. So 30 seconds, and we want to trigger clock time. Okay. So I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. I was going to mention it, but obviously it came up sooner than I expected because I stumbled into it as well. Events are only per map. Okay, so if you set an event on a map and you're not on that map, then you won't get the benefit of the events. Okay, they will trigger as long as you are on the map that has the trigger. Okay, so let's play. Okay, so hopefully this will now work the way I was expecting it to. So you'll see that it starts at 30, but we didn't get the display message. And it's not going to display when it reaches 60, even though that's 30 seconds later, because although we've put 30 into the event scheduler, that's not how many seconds, that's not like a duration of time, that's a hour on the clock that you're setting. So it's like setting an alarm. I want the alarm to go off at 2 o'clock. I want the alarm to go off at 3:30, whatever, right? What you're setting in the event scheduler is you want the script to go off at 30, right? So we need to wait now for this to get back round to 30. The reason it didn't go off straight away is because the map was still loading and the game was still, initializing and everything, so it can't trigger the script immediately, right? So 10 seconds to go, and then hopefully this time we should get our display message as soon as the clock reaches 30. Boom, there we go, right? Time is up, okay? And then I'm not going to leave it, but it's then going to do that again in a minute's time, because it's going to take a minute, because it's got to do 30 seconds to get to 60, and then another 30 seconds to go from 0 to 30. So in a minute, okay? So it's important to understand that if you set your clock to 0 to 60, in other words, the whole thing takes a minute, and you set this to 30, this is not going to go off every 30 seconds. This is actually going to go off every minute, because it's still going to take a minute to get from 30 back round to 30, right? It's still going to take you've got to think it's still a 12-hour period, right? If you set an alarm to go off at 6 o'clock, then it's still going to take the same amount of time to go from 6 back round to 6. It's still going to take 12 hours. So this is not 30 seconds. However, if we added another event and said 60 and set the same script, well, now that's every 30 seconds, because it's going to take 30 seconds to get to 60, then it's going to take 30 seconds to go from 60 to 30, and then 30 seconds to go from 30 to 60, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So now, if we go into game, the first script won't trigger, because although it's set to 30, the game starts at 30. You could set it to 31 for something like that, and it would happen immediately. Or 32, you'd have to deal with the offset of the game loading. But obviously that would eat into your offset for going round the clock again, so you might not want to do that. But nonetheless, when this hits 60, it should show the display message, which then means it's taken 30 seconds, not a minute. Okay? Did I put that on the right map? Let's just double check. Oh, yes. You probably want to set that to 0, because it does sort of, when it gets to 60, it actually immediately resets. So that's an important thing to note as well. Don't actually use the max time, because the max time is actually when it resets. So let's put it to 0 and just confirm that does work. It's easier to think of 0 as being the max time, even though that's the reset time, if that makes sense, because it goes from 0 to 60, but then it immediately resets to 0 when it hits 60. I say 60, that's what I've set it to at the moment. It can be any time, obviously. If we set it to 10, for example, it goes from 0 to 10, but then immediately goes to 0 when it gets to 10. But hopefully now, when it gets to essentially 60, but resets to 0, the script should trigger. Okay? The point is, though, it still takes 30 seconds, because it's instantaneous, right? We've just hit 0, and then we've got the time is up, okay? And then when it gets to 30, it will show again. And then obviously when it gets to 0 again, it will show again. So we've now made a script that happens every 30 seconds. Okay, so is this starting to make sense how the event scheduler works in relation to the clock? Okay, so to paint a different picture, let's say you wanted something to happen 10 seconds, let's say you wanted something to happen at 40 seconds, okay? This is actually going to happen in 10 seconds time, or maybe even 7 seconds time, depending on how long it takes the map to load. And when the timer actually ticks in, it could take, it should take 10 seconds, okay? So if we start the game, although we set it to 40, you'll see that as soon as the time says 40, it will run that script. So now, yeah? So it's not 40 seconds time, it's going to be 10 seconds, because you've got to remember that the clock is going to start halfway through this period, 30 in this case, and you've set this to happen at the hour 40, so that means it's going to happen in 10 seconds time, because the clock is always ticking round in seconds, and so if it's going round in to 60 seconds, then 40 would be 10 seconds on from 30, which is halfway through that. So, if you set this to 600, then halfway through that would be 300. So when you click new game, this would be, the game would be starting at 300. So if you set this to 400, come on, 400. Okay, that's a bit of a bug. You should be able to use bigger numbers than that because you can set the clock to bigger numbers than that. Okay, so I've just restarted RPG in a Box. So let's go back to our map. Let's just quickly double check. I've set this and saved this as 600. Let's go to the event scheduler and try set that to 400. Okay, you can. Okay, so it just needed a restart. That's good. Good to know that's not actually something that needs to be fixed. So be aware of that. Obviously, if you do change your clock time and the max duration, and this isn't reflecting that, it's not accepting any larger numbers, it's probably just because it's got locked into what your time previously was. So just restart RPG in a Box or restart your project. I restarted the whole thing just to be safe, but just restart and it does seem to kick it into gear again. But there you go. So what I wanted to say was we've set this to 400, okay? The maximum duration is 600. The game is going to start at 300 because it's halfway around that time period. And so this is actually going to happen in 100 seconds time, not 400 seconds time, because it's 100 seconds on from where the game actually starts. Does that make sense? So hopefully I've gone over that enough now that it's sort of made it abundantly clear how the clock works, okay? But in essence, this is how the event scheduler works. So if we simplify it again for a second and go to, let's say, 10 seconds, or let's say 60 seconds. Let's have a minute again. So if you wanted something to happen thinking about it, what we could have done, let's try something for a second. Let's just add an event, set this to 60. Okay. And then let's change the time to 600. And then let's change this to 400. So it's not working again. Let's just try this. Let's delete it and add an event and say 400. Okay, that's all you have to do. You don't even need to restart RPG in a Box. Just delete the event and then add it again, okay? So just gets it to I think probably what happens is when you add it, it looks at what you set the maximum clock to each time. So yeah, that's probably an easier, much quicker way than restarting RPG in a Box, okay? So just delete. If you find you can't increase this beyond, what you had your clock set to previously, just delete it and add it again. But now we've done that, I want to actually go back to 60 seconds. So let's say you wanted a script to trigger every 10 seconds. What you'll do is you'll add 1 for 10, 1 for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. We wouldn't have 70. 40, 50. And then instead of 60, you'd have 0, okay? So this would go from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 0, okay? Because remember, 60, which is the maximum, doesn't show on here as an event. It's 0. When it reaches this, to all intents and purposes, this goes back to 0, okay? So when it gets to 60, it will immediately reset to 0. So your event scheduler won't see it as 60, it will see it as 0. So unless you have an event for 0, it won't trigger at 60. Does that make sense? So that's just, a quirk of the system you have to be aware of. But other than that, that's, obviously we haven't covered the day-night stuff, but that's not the point of this video. Now, I just want to check something. If I turn that off and run the game, does the clock work? Yes. So this option here is just for the day-night light settings. It's not for the event scheduler. So the event scheduler is always on, permanently on. You can't turn it off. Obviously, if you don't have any events, then it won't do anything, so you won't even notice it. Okay. But this is like a less sort of intensive way of doing while loops. If you want something that's always doing something, obviously, bear in mind, as I said before, the limitation of this is you have to be on the map that this is on. So if we went to a different map that doesn't have this event scheduler, then we won't get the benefit of the events. So what you might want to do is have scripts where, let's say, for example, at night time, the NPCs are supposed to go inside. Obviously, they're not going to go inside if you're not on the map, right? So what you'd want to do is have an if in your script that you put on the event. Let's just give a quick example. Let's just edit clock time. We're not actually going to play this, but just to show you, if map.name is equal to, overworld or whatever, then that will check when this script triggers, are you in this map? If we are, then you can do all the NPCs moving to different waypoints and disappearing and all of that. Obviously, you can't make NPCs actually go into buildings. So what you would do is you'd simulate it. So you'd have to move first, move to, specific tiles, like the one in front of a doorway. And then when they get there, you'd remove entity, make it look like they've gone inside. Okay. However, if you're then not on that map, you would set a global property that states that this time has been reached. So then you could have it so that when you load back into this map, if that global property is set, it then sets them all off to move into there, or just immediately hides them or whatever. So it gives the illusion that they did that off screen, as it were. But obviously, remember that entities can't be referenced if you're not on that map. So, you have to check if you're in the map to do that. Anyway, I'm not going to cover a script as in-depth as that in this video. I was really just going to explain how the event system works and how to sort of use it. Day-night cycles and NPC routines would be a topic in and of itself, okay? But just to give you an idea of the sorts of things you need to bear in mind when it comes to using the event scheduler, is you have to understand that it will only trigger for the map that you're on. Obviously, you can set up an event. You can set up the same event clock on every single map. So then it doesn't matter, because the global time is global, right? So if we quick play for a minute, notice how the clock is, 32 seconds in or whatever. If I load map 2, and I wonder if 000 is available. Yep. Notice how the clock is still where it was. Okay. So it's not like it resets when you load a map. It's global time. So this whole clock time happens across all maps. It's all the time. This clock is always ticking, no matter what map you're in. Okay. So if you had a script if you had an event schedule on each map that at 40 o'clock or whatever, something should happen, then it doesn't matter what map you're in, as long as all maps have that same schedule. Then as soon as your clock reaches 40, if that map has the same event, it will trigger while you're on that map. Does that make sense? So if you want something to happen across your whole game, just make sure every map has the same event schedule. Okay. So with that said, that brings us to the end of this video. I didn't want it to be too long, so I hope it's not been quite as long as it's probably ended up. But I'll wrap this up here. I think I've gone over enough that it should be simple enough for you now to use and understand. But if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video on the event scheduler. Stay tuned for the next tutorial.